Hi, this is Shalonda Turner with Houston Fashion Bloggers and Live Life and Style, and I have the amazing opportunity to interview Johnny Iuzzini. Am I saying your last name correctly?
Iuzzini.
Iuzzini. And we are here for the Macy's Culinary Council event, Food Truck American Icons Tour, and we're going to get started with some questions here. So my first question for you is, what was it about Chef Eric, you're going to have to help me with some of these pronunciations, Gutierrez, your mentor, that drew you to the art of pastry making?
It wasn't so much him per se, but I come from a background where my mother was a wildlife rehabilitator. So growing up I started my career as a pot washer and then became a dishwasher and then essentially became a prep cook. But my mother was essentially a wildlife veterinarian. So any animal that was hurt or injured in the wilderness would come to her and we'd nurse it back to health. So as a young cook, working in the Catskills, food came in already fabricated, already came in like in bags, like processed, whatever else, broken down. Once I moved to the city to further my career after I graduated high school before college, I started working at this fine dining restaurant, and then it'd be whole animals. It'd be my job to kill lobsters, and the guy next to me is breaking down a goat or whatever it is. So it immediately it tapped into my emotional side, whereas like I had just left home where I was nursing animals back to health, and I can't be the one killing them. You know, it's like as much as I'm a cook and it's fine and everything, I get it. I'm not vegan or anything, but I didn't want it to be in my own hands. Yeah. So it caused like a little bit of turmoil in me. Meanwhile, the pastry chef was making all these fantastical things, these chocolate butterflies and bridges, and I didn't have to kill anything, and it seemed much more creative environment as well. And I'm kind of a creative guy, so it just seemed like a better fit to switch to pastry.
I definitely would probably be right along with you. I'm a big animal lover, and I get really sad when I go into restaurants. I see the lobsters in the tank, and it just makes me sad. I wouldn't be able to do it myself either. Well, that's neat. How amazing was your time in France, studying at the best pastry houses, and how would you say they differ from American pastry?
We don't have that culture. You know, if you go to places like France or Paris or like, you know, the major cities, there's a bakery on every block. You know, there's a butcher on every block. There's a chocolatier on every block. You know, and they really have, that's their culture. We have bakeries, but it's not the same as like what they have. You know, like every district, every neighborhood, every street has one or two or three bread bakers on it there. You know, and we just our country isn't. You know, we don't have those roots. You know, a lot of our country is built on the ancestry of all these people, like the melting pot. But at the same time, like we don't have that type of food culture that they have in a lot of these countries. So that's how it's very different. But you know, being Americans, we have I think the best of everything too, though. Whereas we pick and choose from a lot of different cultures, and we created our own culture. You know, and you know when you think about the Americana bakery, you think about Americana desserts. It's quite our own, you know, like it's not like anything else. So it's pretty amazing.
Do you think you prefer the French culture or a little bit more, or the American culture?
I mean, I've only worked for French chefs. I mean, I've worked all around the world. I worked in Italy, I worked in France, worked in Spain, and American pastry tends to be a bit sweet, a bit heavier, you know, and maybe a bit less refined than French pastry. And so I tend to prefer to work in the French style, and I don't like anything really cloyingly sweet. But I think there's a lot of culture in everything we do. You know, even if you look from region to region as our culture, like if we're in the South right now, and it's very different. You go to a bakery and what you can find at a bakery versus a bakery in New York or a bakery in California. So I love seeing that. Like I love visiting local. You know, and supporting local bakeries every time I travel.
Yeah, it's very different. I'm from Pittsburgh, and we have a bakery that I always go to, Lakin Bakery in Bellevue. But I haven't found any bakeries like that here in Houston. It's more like you go to the grocery store bakery, but no like standalone bakeries that I know of. And I miss that type just from the difference from moving. But what was it about the Macy's Culinary Council that made you want to be a part of it?
I mean, I grew up a Macy's kid. You know, we would go school shopping every year. You know, my mom and dad would take us to get all our jeans and everything else. I grew up kind of like in the Macy's family a little bit. And then about 10 years ago, I was part of something called the Feast Your Senses Tour, where I got to apply my skill set to working with the fragrance division of Macy's, where they had different perfumes. And what we did was we broke down the perfumes based on their top base and middle notes, and then rebuilt them with flavors of desserts. So I matched the flavors of the perfume with desserts, so people would be able to smell the perfume and eat the desserts and make the connection. You know, and it's very emotional. You know, like for me, every time I smell fresh cut grass or a pine tree, I'm immediately brought back to my youth. You know, to whether it's a holiday, Christmas, or mowing the lawns with my family or whatever else. So you know, when you can really connect scent and food and emotion together, it's an extraordinary. You know, when people kind of realize where they're going, it's a lot of emotion wrapped around that.
smells are very nostalgic. I thought I was the only one who felt that, like a certain wind in the air. I'm like, oh, this makes me think of football games and fall. I
So
love
like the,
that
the most
connection.
popular fragrances tend to be ones that people can relate to.
Yeah.
You know, like if people, and it's also like if you like tend to like sweeter food, chances are you're gonna wear a sweeter perfume or a sweeter cologne. You know, if you tend to like bitter or pungent foods, you'll tend to go that way as well. So it's funny how that relates to how you like to eat.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I wish I would have known about that. I would have loved to take part in that. You have received many nominations and awards for your exemplary skills in pastry making, from Best New Pastry Chef to the James Beard Foundation Outstanding Pastry Chef of the Year. How do you take it all in?
I mean, I've been fortunate enough to work for some of the best chefs around the world. You know, I've made every sacrifice that I could to do so. You know, whether it's never having holidays off or traveling or making no money. You do what you have to do, but I'm very proud of what I've achieved at the age that I'm at, and I try to inspire the generation after me and make myself readily available to them to help them along the way and open any doors I can do for them. You know, and I think it's really important to give back.
Well, congratulations on everything.
Thank you.
Just a couple more questions. You have been on plenty of TV shows, including Top Chef. What would you say is the biggest difference between preparing food on TV and versus a restaurant home kitchen setting?
Well, that's a couple parts of that question. A lot of people come to me all the time. They're like, I think I want to be a chef, this and that, because I love to cook at home. I mean, just because you love to cook at home doesn't mean you want to make a career out of it. Like I almost never cook at home, and because I do it for a living, you know. And so, that's the first thing. So, my advice to people is before you invest, cooking schools are quite expensive now, $60,000-$80,000 for the top schools. Before you invest in that kind of education, go and get it's called a stage, like a training. Spend some time working in that arena. Go and work at a restaurant. If you think you want to be a restaurant chef, go work in a restaurant for a little while on your own time. See what it's like. Work the late hours, like work the long hours. Give up the holidays, work nights, weekends, whatever else, and see. It's not the same thing. Just because you love to cook doesn't mean you should be a chef. And the flip side of that too is when it comes to competitions, not everybody who is a great chef is a great competitor. And not everybody who's a great competitor necessarily is a great chef. So when you watch these shows, it's kind of interesting because some people obviously have better skill sets than others, but they don't handle pressure well, and it's extremely high pressure in these cooking shows because you're not working in your own kitchen. There's always like these challenges thrown at you where you have to think on the fly, so you have to really be fast on your feet as far as being able to conceive dishes or techniques, whatever else. You're working with whatever they take away from you if you only have one pan or whatever it is. So it's quite difficult, these cooking shows, and I have to hand it to anybody who goes on in that. It's tough, man. It's really tough.
So
Don't like I watch people say, oh, I could do better. Like I doubt it, man. Like,
Yeah, right.
You go on these shows and like it's tricky because it's like it's go time and like there's cameras all over in your face. It's reality. It's very difficult.
It's not the romantic fantasy that people have in the back of their head of being a chef. And the last question, if you weren't a pastry chef, what other category of gourmet food would you specialize in?
That's a good question. I mean, there's something about being creative that excites me, and outside of like pastries or bread, or something like that, or chocolate, I would probably get into something like, within the food world, something that makes me interesting, excites me is like old school butcher shops. Not so much the guys that are like just breaking out halalos, but the guys that make sausages and make all the kind of stuff. Because there's a lot of blending of flavors, a lot of like the aging process, and also cheese is really interesting to me. Maybe I would get into making cheese. Something like that would be kind of cool.
Very neat. Well, it was very nice having the opportunity to interview you, and thank you so much for letting me take your time. And I look forward to your cooking downstairs. Really looking forward to it, and covering the event later.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks.